Part 4. To the Exiled Lands. Chapter 18. Feeling the Rain. Night turns to morning. This is supposed to be the end of the 3-day ceremony. But as I'm gathering myself to return to my friend's house to pack up and go home, I'm still very much in the clutches of an overpowering shadow. The irony, looking back, is that even though I never drove my car off a cliff, on this third night, the cliff appeared. And there I am, down at the bottom of a ravine, having gone from fighting off the voices to trying to control my thoughts, to begging and pleading for reprieve. Nothing's working. All I want is to get out of the dark pit, but it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and I have not slept. Finally, I look over at the medicine woman and tell her, I can't go home like this. I feel like I'm possessed. Something's wrong. She nods with empathy. I go on. I cannot go back to my children like this. I need another night. No problem, she says, and lets me know that I can stay with her until it's time for the 4th night of ceremony. In the meantime, she prepares food for me to absorb the plant medicine and restore my energy for the night to come. Trying not to wolf it down all at once, I'm so grateful for an extra night. As scared as I am to confront another evening like the last one, I'm more scared to leave and put whatever is on me on my children. You can sleep if you want, she says, but I can't close my eyes. For the rest of the day, I am awake, too afraid to sleep. In my best attempt to sound like everything is fine, I call the kids, 13-year-old Jaden and 11-year-old Willow. Hey, I have to finish another night of ceremony, so I won't be back tonight like I thought I would. Okay, Jaden says, we'll see you when you get home tomorrow. And Willow echoes him, okay, Mommy, I love you. I love you guys too. When night falls, for the 4th time, the medicine woman brings me the tray. I take the plastic cup and swallow it down fast. Tonight, unlike the other nights, I need to drink only once. 45 minutes pass before I feel the familiar hot wave come over my body. As fear begins to overwhelm me, I try to talk it down, saying, it's okay, out loud to myself. Sitting off to the side, the medicine woman gives me the first set of instructions I've heard. Don't talk, she says gently. Just be still. My heart beats faster as my fear runs up on me even more. I start to resist, trying to find stillness in a comfortable seated position. The less I say or do, the less threatening my fears seem. There's no way to control this experience. I have to trust and let the medicine conduct the ride. The instructions to be still allow me to take a first small step toward cutting off the blood supply to my ego. No longer fighting, I relax into the storm, surrendering to stillness and sitting in the terror of my fear. All the horrible pictures, all the voices, all of the shadows start to wane. Though I don't know it yet, I will learn that after a psychological storm, a cleansing follows. And that's what this is, a cleansing. A purification of thoughts, beliefs, and energies that are not born of light and no longer serve me. Suddenly it hits me. My whole ordeal has been one of my own making. I've been taunting myself with false beliefs about my life and who I am. I exhale, surrendering more deeply, allowing the pictures to simply be, to watch them move past me, and know they are only a movie. Fear was soon dissolved by iridescent images. Abruptly, a bright light accompanied by iridescent blades and half-moon shapes, like the blades of a ceiling fan, dominated my vision. They made a tick, tick, tick staccato sound and moved at an extremely rapid pace before my eyes. Within moments, I felt a warmth in my heart that surged throughout my entire body. The brightest of lights cascaded over me, washing over everything with a holographic shimmer to it. And it was an inner sighting that made me gasp. What followed felt like I was being wrapped in the most blissful love, a love I had never felt before. This must be heaven, I thought. This must be what it feels like in the bosom of God. The bath of the stream was where I wanted to live, always. I'd always believed there was a God, but I had never felt the presence of the divine. In this transformational moment, I did. I could finally feel who and what I truly am, a beloved child of the divine, always and forever worthy and deserving of being loved. Tears poured from my eyes in deep gratitude that I had made it through the shadow of the valley of death, and my reward was the embrace of God's love and the gift of being alive. You did well, the medicine woman said to me with a soft smile. I couldn't stop thanking her. On a high like no other, I couldn't wait to get home to see my children. I needed to hug them and tell them how much I loved them, how they had been my beacons of hope for so long. On my drive home from Ojai, I called Jaden and Willow and told them everything. As we talked, I felt how contagious authentic joy can be. Not the joy we pretend to have, not the joy we try to conjure from our worldly experiences, but the joy that is birthed from the love of self that comes from a connection to the divine. Willow and Jaden were so happy for me, and I could feel their lightness through my lightness. When I got home, I blasted Bob Marley, and I ordered dozens and dozens of long-stemmed white roses. When they arrived, I made arrangements with all the roses in different sized vases and placed them all over the house. All I could think was, this is the mother my children deserve to have, and I prayed for the strength to hold on to this light. The biggest change to come from that first Aya journey was that never again would I contemplate suicide. There was much more work to do in exploring parts of myself that had gone long ignored. One insight I missed was that the further I got into my 40s, the deeper I waded into a classic midlife crisis and the burning question, outside of my marriage, my kids, and my career, who am I? Even with my new deep willingness to live, I couldn't escape feeling dull, withered, dry, and brittle. I remembered myself in my late teens and early 20s, hoping one day to live the dream, being at the threshold of possibility, feeling free and alive. What happened to her? How could I reclaim that vibrancy, that fearlessness and freedom? My kids were there to remind me what fearless freedom might look like. One evening in late 2013, Willow and I returned home and were met by music blasting from the other side of the house. The sun just gone down and the house was dark, except for one light that I saw spilling out of the multi-purpose room. Willow followed as I went to investigate. Will and I both love the concept of the multi-purpose room when we built the house at Her Lake. We could entertain in it, host fundraisers, gather all extended family members for special occasions, or simply use it as a space for creativity. We dubbed it the ballroom, which sounds fancier than it is. Just a spacious room that comes to life, whatever's happening in it. On this particular evening, Jaden, charcoal in hand, stood alone in front of a large canvas. At 15, Jaden had been working for years in the entertainment industry as an actor and recording artist. From a very young age, Jaden, Willow, and Trey had heard me talk about the importance of using their art, their personas, and their talent, not only as entertainment, but to become a movement unto themselves in order to create change in the world. Jaden, at age 10, started to focus on everything related to water pollution and the devastating effects of massive dumping of plastics in the ocean. At age 14, he came to me and Will to present his vision for Just Water, a startup that began by packaging natural spring water in recyclable boxes instead of plastic bottles. We helped him get it going, but Jaden was at the helm, working with a team that has kept it growing ever since. Before long, his 501c3 nonprofit helped to develop and install mobile filtration stations to tackle water contamination in ignored communities like Flint, Michigan. None of this had surprised me. Jaden was an early bloomer, wise beyond his years, and a restless seeker, pushing against the status quo. I once said to Will, "We'll be lucky to keep him here with us till 16. So when I walked into the room and saw him drawing on that canvas with charcoal, with words and phrases of his frustration, I knew something was up. He didn't turn to me, not so much because he was angry, but because he was burdened by a heavy weight. "What's going on?" "I need something different, Mom. It's nothing personal. I love you, but I think it's time for me to leave." I said nothing. Jaden turned to me and paused to look me in the eyes as he continued to explain how he was feeling. He finally confessed, "I need to feel the rain." I knew exactly what that meant. He had to be feeling trapped in a certain way, and the change he sought was necessary for him to get some space. He needed to spread his wings in the way he felt was best for him. We lived in rarefied air, in a remote setting, far from the rough and tumble of it all, and he was a 15-year-old boy wanting to chart his own course. We had always encouraged his independence, but how independent can you be living in the bubble? He had to break out of the confines of the life that was not of his own making. He needed to know himself outside the world his father and I created. For a moment, we were all quiet. Will was out of town working, and my first impulse was to say, "Hold up, let's talk to your dad about this." But Will left most decisions with respect to the kids up to me, and I thought this needed an immediate response. Either way, I knew this was going to be really hard for all of us. Maybe, I thought, I could suggest putting a pause on Jaden's exodus. Maybe we could postpone his departure to wherever he needed to go, to sleep under the stars, ride the rails, or heed the voice of his inner calling. No, we could not, and I knew my response to this pivotal moment was important, because I believed he was going to leave either way. I could either be in partnership with him or against him. The latter could possibly break the power of his determination to face life's adversity on his own terms. Or worse, I could risk losing him for a very long time. I did not want to lose Jaden in that way. As scary as every image was that flashed through my mind, I knew that if I didn't let him go on his terms, it would hurt him more than help. You can't preach independence to your kids and then change your mind when they listen to you. In our youth, Will and I both had found much magic within ourselves from living on the edge. Jaden wanted an opportunity to find his magic on those edges as well. That being said, I was ready to fall apart, especially when I discovered that Jaden was already packed and set to go. He would be moving in with Moises and Mateo, who were coming to pick him up. Moy and Mateo were also young men in the entertainment business and navigating the same terrain. Jaden wasn't exactly heading off alone into the wilderness. Willow and I waited for Jaden in the foyer while he went to his room to get his things. When he came downstairs, he seemed resolved and perhaps relieved. "How can I help?" I stammered. "You need a ride?" Jaden thought for a moment, then agreed that I could drop him at the lookout on the side of the road not far from our house. "Okay, I can do that." We loaded up the car, and the three of us rode in silence up to the lookout. There was nothing to say. This was happening. As soon as we came around the corner, I spotted Moy's car and pulled up behind it. All I could see were his red brake lights glaring in the night. Everything else was shrouded in darkness. Jaden hopped out of our car and grabbed his stuff from the back. "I love you, Mom. I'll talk to you later," he said. Then he walked to Moy's car and jumped in the back. Within minutes, he was gone. A flood of tears fell from my eyes. I did my best to keep from wailing, to maintain some control in the midst of the worst heartbreak I had ever felt. I didn't want to alarm Willow, but there was no holding back. My heart crumbled as I sat there drowning in my own tears in front of my baby girl. Willow said quietly, "It's gonna be okay, Mommy." All I could do was nod. I knew, deep down, that Jaden was going to be fine, and I would assist in whatever he needed on his new journey. That's what mothers do. The pain was simply because I wasn't ready to let him go. But I knew, with certainty, I had to. After he left, the hardest parts for me were the change in the rhythm of the days and not feeling his presence in the house. We still talked all the time. He learned a lot about the everyday stuff of life, as we all do when we leave the nest. About a year and a half after moving out, Jaden had a revelation, although he didn't move back into the family home. He had come to talk to Will and me to let us know what it was like to feel the rain. The responsibility that comes with the freedom of being a full-fledged adult was more intense than he'd thought. Everything from paying bills to putting food in the fridge, from making sure he kept up with schooling, all the way to tending emotional well-being. He admitted that he understood why we had been so protective. At 16 and a half, he recognized the gift of family, the power of unity and togetherness that we had created, not to control him and his siblings, but because we love them. "I just want to thank you and Dad for everything," he said with deep sincerity. "I love you guys. Thank you for all that you've done for me." He left to feel the rain and discovered the true meaning of gratitude. It's a gift that has remained with him since. In these years, Trey was grappling with his place in the world as he made his way into young adulthood. During high school, he had made the decision to live with us, as Cherie, remarried, was relocating, and Trey wanted to finish school without having to move. As a star football player, he had received several appealing college offers to play football, even to consider playing professionally. After wrestling seriously with whether that was what he wanted, he ultimately turned the offers down, and instead did a great deal of soul searching. In the process, Trey began to explore the musical talents he'd had all along. Although he enjoyed producing and DJing, none of it seemed to be fulfilling at that juncture. And Trey's search for meaning, in years to come, his interests in unraveling the mysteries of the universe led him to look into the healing properties of plant medicine. In this way, he was able to feel the rain. The timing was such that he and I could connect even more with our shared interests and abilities to hold space for one another. We can talk for hours about deep, complex questions of our existence, and often do. He reminds me frequently of the beauty and blessings within the rain. Willow had been pushing boundaries for years now, on multiple fronts. At age 11, not long after her decision not to move forward with Annie, Willow decided she wanted to shave her head, just like Amy, who, at the time, wore her hair very close to the scalp. Usually, your daughter comes to you and asks if she can cut bangs. Willow went straight to wanting to be damn near bald. My response was, okay, let's just do it in steps. We first shaved her sides and kept her hair long in the front. That lasted only a little while before she came back with, I'm ready to shave it off. She was so clear on it, I wasn't going to fight her. This was about her hair. As a mother raising a daughter, I wanted to establish her ownership over her body early. And we were talking about hair here. It would grow back. We arranged for an appointment with her hairstylist, and I watched Willow's transformation as her beautiful thick hair fell to the floor. The whole time, my daughter beamed with an elated smile, and I couldn't have been more proud. She would say later that it was an act of rebellion, as well as part of her exploration of beauty and identity as a young black female. I was in awe. How does an 11-year-old shrug off the opinions and judgments of the world? Similarly, as her musical evolution unfolded, Willow continued to follow the beat of her own drum. To me, she was a prodigy. I'd hear her playing guitar in her room, night and day, or listen to her doing vocal warm-ups, or pop into the recording studio to see her developing her own sound. And I could tell that she was off and running on her own heroine's journey. Mom, you will not believe what's happening. Did you know there are girls my age who are being sold for sex in this country? My immediate response, since I'd always assumed this was a third world issue, was, no, that doesn't happen here. It's only overseas. Willow had recently watched a short film called Coney 2012, a documentary about human trafficking released on YouTube. The film focused on Joseph Kony, a warlord from Central Africa who trafficked and abducted children for use as child soldiers. Willow had then launched into her own research, only to discover that human trafficking was the second most prevalent and profitable global crime after drug trafficking, and that millions of children and adults were increasingly being stolen or sold for use in forced labor, for sexual exploitation, as soldiers on battlefields, to the black market for human organs, and more. The numbers on children and adults being trafficked in the U.S. proved how wrong I was about it only happening elsewhere. Willow insisted, I want to give my voice to this. People have to know this is happening. It was a no-brainer that the two of us would work together to raise awareness on this issue. Learning from activists, leaders, and lawmakers already on the ground seeking solutions was a priority. One of my first calls was to Angelina Jolie, then in the trenches on behalf of refugees around the world. I had long admired Angelina's commitment as an activist. She generously put me in touch with a lawyer named Adam Waldman, who soon introduced me to survivors whom I met when I visited safe houses in cities around the country. The stories we heard were shocking and heart-wrenching, and I was certain that if more people in positions of influence heard them, they would be moved to act. Within months, Willow and I visited the Capitol to meet with lawmakers, and Adam arranged for me to testify in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about the need for stronger legislation to more effectively prosecute the crime of trafficking. What really made the difference were the stories of the survivors I brought with us, including Jam, Min Dang, and with Thelma T. Ortiz, so that they could, in their own words, share their horrific experiences of being trafficked in the United States. This cause became deeply personal. Over the years, I came across stories from my travels so tragic and unbelievable that at times I was left to question how a good and just God could allow this to exist. One of the most disturbing realities was the rising number of boys being trafficked. Because of the stigma for boys who are exploited sexually, they are less likely to speak out and look for help. The lack of resources, including fewer beds or programs that accept males, leaves many of them to be exploited further. And the exploitation of transgender youth is even more confounding. Another haunting reality was learning that many of the survivors I met had been trafficked by people they knew and thought they could trust. Family members, friends, lovers, employers, law enforcement, you name it. My false assumption had been that most were kidnapped and exploited by strangers. In sharing these stories with the media, my emphasis, and I couldn't say it often enough, was there's no human being on this planet who should ever have to endure such treatment, and especially not a child. After traveling to Mexico and speaking to leaders there, as well as to American policy representatives, I wanted to do more to help raise awareness in Latin communities where trafficked women, men, and children were disappearing in droves, most never to be seen again. This was something brought to my attention years prior when Salma Hayek called me about a march she was organizing in Juarez to rouse action on behalf of disappeared women and children in Mexico. Salma also wanted to shine a light on the mass graves where bodies, mostly women, were being discarded in the middle of nowhere. When Salma called, I was not available to join her, but I do remember questioning how I would play a relevant role, even telling myself, a black woman marching for Mexican women feels like what's happening there is not my issue. Once I became more versed in the realities of human trafficking, I could see how wrong that thinking was. The truth is that one woman is every woman. All the separations we try to create from color to economic or social strata are false. If we were going to have impact, our responsibility was to do so within all communities, all over the world. To make amends for my former ignorance, I decided to learn Spanish to have greater reach. One of my first ventures was writing and recording a song in Spanish. Nada se compara, nothing compares, about human trafficking and asking Salma to direct the video. She jumped on board without blinking an eye. I then put my skills to use by doing outreach on Spanish media in multiple markets. Willow and I traveled to Miami and did press, and I went on to Spain. No matter what language or demographic, or frankly, the specific issues being raised, I strongly believe that as women, we all need to recognize our connectivity to one another, the necessity to uplift one another, and to protect our children and the world. Together, we have the unstoppable power to do so. Willow had been the catalyst for raising awareness at a time when few were paying attention, proving you're never too young to affect great change. Like mother, like daughter. And that was not limited to our activism. It also applied to how she liked to push edges and walk on fire. Not so different from me. But when it comes to jumping off cliffs for the hell of it, that she gets from her father. There are signs along the edge of the ocean in Kauai, near the top of the path that leads down to the Queen's Bath. A natural, shallow swimming hole with dire warnings such as waves will sweep you out to sea, and many have died here. When 14-year-old Willow and I went for a hike along the cliffs one day on vacation, I must have missed those signs. Given my outsized fear of heights, I didn't need to be warned. My days of trying to drive off the side of the road were behind me, but I was still sensitive to the ghastly pull of ledges and cliffs. As we start out on the narrow trail along a ridge, I'm already having twinges of fear. Not Willow, who looks down and then out at the choppy seas before reaching the Queen's Bath. You know, she says, I wonder what it would feel like to jump off of here. My brain does a double take. I glance over the ridge on my right side, shake my head, look away, and then, oh shit! Next thing I know, Willow, moving with feline agility and speed, goes flying off the edge, vanishing out of my sight. I run to the cliff just in time to see that she has barely cleared the rocks to make it into the churning ocean below. Oh my God, what the fuck? All I can do is scream her name. I frantically look around for anyone below who may be close enough to help as I watch her struggling to swim to shore and lift herself up onto the rocks. There is no one in sight. Once again, I think of the Buddhist story of the armless mother who watches her child fall into the river and get swept away by its current. Willow, straining hard to pull herself out of the water and onto the rocks, is truly in God's hands. All I can do is watch and pray, horrified, terrified, and armless. Finally, Willow pulls herself up with all her might, preventing the rough waters from washing her out to sea. Then she gingerly finds a path through the rocks to eventually make it back to me. I was too relieved and too grateful to be upset, especially after witnessing what an exhilarating experience it had been for her. Instead of delivering a lecture, "What were you thinking?" I hold back. Besides, I had seen her obvious alarm while hoisting herself out of the water, and I had to trust that Willow had learned a big lesson. I was pretty sure she'd never try that again. As Willow ran toward me, I was silent. "Mom, did you see that? That was great!" Willow burst forth with unbounded enthusiasm. "I did," I said, staying cool as we kept walking away from the edge and back toward the trailhead. Calmly, keeping my feelings grounded, careful not to pull Willow out of her experience, I continued. "You jumped out of nowhere. You gotta take more time to check out your surroundings, Willow, and see what you're getting into." Willow paused a minute and thought about it, then continued with, "I did get scared for a second while I was struggling to get out of the water. Pay attention to that. That's all I'm saying. That was dangerous. That water could have swept you out to sea, and there would have been nothing anyone could do." "Yeah, you're right." Willow made her own decision, glancing back at the jumping off spot, and shook her head and smiled. She was still tasting the experience with exhilaration and delight. After we were far enough from the cliffs above the Queen's Bath, and my shock and fear had subsided, I made a point to say, "That was pretty badass, though." And Willow's beautiful face lit up. Everybody has different edges they like to walk, and different ways to feel the rain. More and more, my way of walking edges and feeling the rain was through plant medicine ceremonies. After my first Aya experience, a year went by before I dared go back into a ceremony. That third night had been like being trapped in a haunted house with no way out. But still grappling with a midlife crisis and searching for paths to remedy it, I gathered the courage to return to my inner world. Before long, I was in ceremony every 2 weeks. That's some hardcore searching. And with these visits to the exiled lands inside of me, I believed my work in Aya had certified me as wise and enlightened. Yeah, I was that one, the pseudo-guru, the spiritual neophyte who has yet to scratch the surface of true wisdom, but believes she has more answers to life than anyone. Well, there is such a thing as getting tripped up by the pitfalls of the pseudo-guru. That was me, setting myself to fall off the edge of high and mightydom. I didn't know shit. One of my pitfalls was my steadfast belief that if only Will could catch up to my level of enlightenment, things would change. We actually had a few Aya sessions together, and afterward, I did see him differently. When Will and I went into ceremony together the first time, we had no great expectations. But that night, We got to witness each other's innocence, the power of our union, and how much we loved to laugh together. Afterward, he and I went to the kitchen to get something to eat, and we were laughing so loudly at one point that Willow and Trey came out of their rooms late to investigate. "Hey, are you guys okay?" Willow yelled down the stairs. "Oops, sorry, we didn't mean to wake you," I said, followed by more laughter. Here we were, like the teenagers in the house, getting checked by our kids. Trey chimed in, chuckling too. "Okay, you guys, have a good night." I got to see the little boy in Will, who just wanted to play and didn't need applause. That authentic part of him showed me how healing and magical his humor really is. I had never been able to fully appreciate and honor his innocent joy, and how he can use humor to dispel the clouds, even in the most challenging moments. As much as I wished the night could have fixed everything, the time spent together also revealed the daunting work that needed to be done. We were each the leading player in our own fractured fairy tale, presented as two separate realities. We both believed our version of the story was right, and that made the other wrong. After almost 20 years, give or take, it seemed that nothing was going to change between us. By his own admission, feelings were not a priority for Will. How he felt, how anybody felt, was not a priority. That was a difficult reality for me to continue to navigate and accept. How many years had I been clinging to? We'll get to that later. The time when I could express my need for deeper emotional connection. In hindsight, I see clearly that my 40th birthday was our breaking point. Will's love language of material and experiential extravagance was how he knew to connect. It was difficult for him to hear that I didn't need all of that. I just needed him. I needed his heart, his willingness to emotionally connect with me, to receive me and see me. Without that, he couldn't possibly know what I was going through. And without that, I couldn't find the ground on which to build the appreciation he wanted to feel consistently. It was nobody's fault. As much as I wanted him to love me, that would never happen if I didn't love myself. And the same applied to him. Will and I had pictures in our mind of what a happily married couple was, and our pictures didn't match. Inevitably, we came to the proverbial stage of irreconcilable differences. That realization became starkly apparent by 2016. We had been here before. There had been several on-again and off-again attempts at salvaging the marriage. We were tired from not finding a middle ground. We'd been on a seesaw for too long, highs and lows, hot and cold. But even with that, and even though we flunked out of marriage therapy, there was this thing between us. We had an underlying, unbreakable bond, this fundamental friendship, even if we couldn't nurture it properly. With all our ups and downs, divorce was a real option in my mind at times. However, despite rumors to the contrary, I could never find the heart to meet with one single lawyer. I could never break the promise I'd made all those years ago in Will's mother's backyard, that we would never be in a position to need a prenuptial agreement because we would never need a divorce. Throughout, I had chosen the discomfort of staying in my ailing marriage over destroying our family and the community we had created. I was smart enough to admit I was too immature to launch a legal battle without creating a bloodbath. Lawyers would have taken advantage of my emotional state, made sure they got a big check, and left me in deep regret. Will and I had our problems, but what we had at the core deserved better than legal warfare. I had always pledged to myself that if we were really going to end our marriage, we would do so with an amicable partnership to keep together the family we both valued. We'd have to work as members of the same team. There had to be a way to lovingly uncouple without being put under the microscope of the world. In other words, we would choose to divorce without divorcing. That is, to split up, to separate on our own terms without legal interference. So at the end of 2016, Will and I looked each other in the eyes and decided to separate in every way except legally. For us, what mattered most was mutual agreement and informing the children of our separation. We would remain family strong, not lose our friendship, and maintain our policy of complete transparency, i.e., no secrets about what we were doing and whom we were doing it with. We didn't believe we owed the public any specifics, which was, without a doubt, a slippery slope. The pitfall for me in this plan, and I stepped right into it, was believing I was evolved enough to manage this alternative approach to ending our marriage. The pseudo-guru, who uses rationale and borrowed wisdom to tell you what you want to hear, insisted that because of my nearly 4 years of plant medicine work and spiritual growth, this decision was elevated and correct. Oh, what fools we mortals be. The reckoning was to come. I was first introduced to the concept of the red shoes in Women Who Run with the Wolves. Clarissa Pinkola Estes describes a woman's starved psyche and soul in these ways. A woman who has been captured knows no better and will take something, anything, that seems similar to the original treasure, good or not. And in this state, she will take any food regardless of its condition or its effect, for she is trying to make up for past losses. And finally, we can better understand the woman who dives into excesses, the most common being drugs, alcohol, and bad love, and who is driven by soul hunger by noting the behavior of the starved and ravening animal. Clarissa illustrates this condition by exploring the experience of the adopted girl in the Hans Christian Andersen story, The Red Shoes. The girl has lost connection to her primal longings and soon obsesses about having her own red shoes in which to dance and move through the world. Once she puts on the shoes that she makes for herself out of scraps, she's taken over by them. As Clarissa writes, here, her acute starvation of soul and meaning forces her to once more grasp for the red shoes, strap them on, and begin her last dance, a dance into the void of unconsciousness. Though I knew this story, I could not know that I was about to be trapped in my own red shoes. Like the girl in the story who is gratified by her red shoes, unaware of their destructive power until the rapture turns to pain, I got preoccupied with making up for lost time and reclaiming the days of my youth. The warning of the story is that once her dance begins, the orphan girl can't remove the red shoes, no matter how hard she tries. The only way to stop the dance is for her feet to be cut off. That's the backstory to what I call an entanglement. Let me clarify. In referring to entanglements as such, I don't think of them as affairs. I associate affairs with cheating. But if you choose to refer to an entanglement as an affair, that works too. In terms of Will and me, there were no secrets, so there was no affair. Hold on, we will get to that red table conversation later. So, after Will and I separated, I put on my red shoes and fell into an entanglement. You know the expression, oh, what a tangled web we weave? That's where I was. The word must have been in my subconscious when I first used it. I'd learn later that Buddhist and Bhakti traditions use entanglement to describe human interaction in the physical world that is not steeped in spiritual understanding. We can become entangled with our entitlements, addictions that are self-gratifying, combative beefs and rivalries, spending money we don't have, indulging in excess, sharing an unkind gossip intended to hurt or gain an upper hand over others, vengeful acts, or simply looking for fulfillment in all the wrong places. If your human purpose is to live your time on the planet learning how to love, anytime you step away from acting from a pure place of love, you run the risk of becoming entangled with self-negating energy. If the red shoes give us only fleeting pleasure that turns to chronic pain, why is it so hard to remove the shoes? Because many of us enjoy pain. We like the chaotic roller coaster ride that gives us an illusion of exhilaration, messy dramas that are all-consuming. Yes, many of us are addicted to pain, to our romantic suffering. Some of us use pain as a blanket to blame, as a justification to avoid recognizing the part we play in creating our dysfunctional lives. For the record, my partner in the entanglement, entanglee if you will, was not, as it would be said a lot, my son's best friend. When we met, he was not shy about expressing how he was suffering from depression, unresolved grief, and later, issues with his health. I wanted to help. And since we both had suffered enormous amounts of loss, we met there. This is how a friendship unfolded that, much later, and very unexpectedly, turned romantic. When it ran its course, I decided to step away with the intention of remaining friends while continuing to be supportive. But in de-entangling, there can be bruised feelings. He may have assumed that I was going back to my marriage when that was not the case. In any event, he made the choice to sever communications with me, which I chose to respect. This period was when I had to confront the entitlement of the red shoe-wearing pseudo-guru in me. The pitfall happens when she thinks she has arrived at a place in her healing where she can distinguish between healthy sustenance and the poisoned honey of false beliefs. Until she recognizes that the poisoned honey will never quench her craving, she will be eternally unfulfilled. To save herself, she will have to do something as radical as cutting off her own feet to be rid of the red shoes she so desired. Only then will she be able to grow new feet without the shoes. And here's where these pitfalls are meant to be great teachers. They show us our unhealed parts so we can lean into the unglamorous, arduous work of self-inventory in order to transform and grow. When you can have gratitude for the experience, the deep healing process has taken hold. With that said, I am deeply grateful for it all. Why? Because my biggest lesson overall was that the problem was me. No one else, not my entanglee, especially not Will. And although it takes two to tango, I can only analyze and take responsibility for my part. In so doing, I felt enough discomfort to fall from my perch as a spiritual know-it-all. I had to submit to the fact that once again, I had tried to escape my deeper work and had gotten off track, and I knew nothing. I was back at square one. In 2018, with the end of the entanglement, I hobbled on scorched earth on my little ankle nubs after cutting off my feet with those red shoes and fell into another kind of despair. At 46, I had not realized my dream of happily ever after, and it was nowhere in sight. Unlike in my 20s, when it had been easy to pick myself up and go back out to conquer the world, at this stage, I couldn't even see my place in the world at all. I had to mourn the reality that what had been would not be again. I could succumb to the classic fate of the bitter aging bitch, or muster the courage to continue the journey on my own? Willow's lyrics said it best. And I'm taking this adventure on my own, walking through a darkened forest, going home. Curious, furious, I feel alone. What I didn't expect was how far I would have to travel to learn to embrace the rain. Just because someone stumbles and loses their way doesn't mean they are lost forever. Charles Xavier, X-Men. That's some real talk.